All right, this is video 5 on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. Now in videos 1 and 2, we talked about how to set up Claude Cowork and make sure it's connected to your tech stack. In videos 3 and 4, we talked about how to automate your prospecting using Claude Cowork and then how to prepare and knock any of your sales meetings out of the park using Claude. Now in video 5, we're going to cover a very common workflow for sales teams, which is taking assets that your marketing team provides and using Claude Cowork to use those assets both for prospecting as well as lead follow-up to generate meetings and pipeline. So we're going to go through 2 workflows. The first one is your marketing team is scheduling a webinar or some sort of event. How can you use the collateral around that event in order to generate outbound messaging that you can personalize at scale to your prospects so you can drive attendance and demand for those events. The second workflow is how can you take a list of leads that have either done things like signing up for an ebook or interacting with your website or attending one of your events. How can you take a lead list that have done all these different activities, opted into different lead magnets, and automate highly personalized follow-up messaging to all of those leads using something like Claude. All right, so let's start by setting up the scenario for our first workflow. So a lot of marketing teams will put together webinars or even do physical events, but they won't generate the content or even some of the copy for their sales teams to be able to drive some demand or attendance to these events. So a lot of times a marketing team will put together this amazing landing page in order for people to register for a webinar or an event. But then they go to the sales team in order to write some of the emails to actually get their accounts or their prospects to actually attend these events. So a very common use case for me personally is to take the landing page or any sort of meeting or event brief that the marketing team has put together and take that and create outbound messaging highly customized for a specific company. And so what I'll show you is, I created this pseudo event that we'll walk through, which is a pipeline summit, physical event. There's a pseudo agenda as well as speakers that will be attending. But the goal is we can actually feed the copy from this web page or this landing page into Claude and have Claude generate the first pass of a sequence so the sales rep doesn't have to do it and they can just focus on finding the right people within their accounts to send these messages to. So now that we have an understanding of the scenario, let's go into Claude and start building out this messaging. All right, so now we're in Claude, so let's actually start building out this outbound sequence. So the first thing we're going to do is actually call the cold email skill. Now, if you haven't built out a cold email skill, this will be in one of the future videos on how to actually build out these skills and package your very common workflows. But what we're going to do here is we're going to say use the cold email skill to generate 4 outbound emails to drive attendance and registration to this event. So we're going to do this, and then I have the event as an HTML page. Ask clarifying questions if you aren't sure what to generate. Output. The tone should be professional and concise. So we're going to use the cold email skill to generate 4 outbound emails. We're asking Claude if it has any clarifying questions on what we expect it to output. And then lastly, we're going to give the tone that it should go. And then we're going to kick this off. And we've given it context on the event itself through the HTML page. So now Claude is going to go review the landing page and then review the skill and then actually start creating these emails. So let's give it a second to see what it outputs and see if we need to have any additional prompts in order to steer Claude to give us the proper email sequence. Now, while Claude is working, I did want to shift gears and actually walk through the cold email skill. As I mentioned, all of these assets I will link in the description below so you can use these skills for your own workflows and just customize them to your business. But the key things and why I'm using this skill is, one, it's going through and reading an ICP document and a brand guideline document. So I don't have to specify to Claude that, I want to go after these types of companies or this is the types of companies I'm going after and the people within those organizations. The second thing is it goes over the writing principles that Claude is going to follow as it generates the sequence. And it's going to go over voice and tone. But primarily when it comes to writing, I'm interested in the structure of the overall sequence. And this is the structure of the email. So it's talking about an observation of the prospect, a problem, proof, like a customer story, and then an ask. Has guidelines on how to write subject lines. And then for sequences specifically, how the follow-up messages should all look like so that there's, never a checking in type email, but there's actually like each email has a different hook to why they should respond to us. So I did want to show this. And then the last thing in the skill file is actually some gold standard emails that I have written myself that have generated meetings and like meaningful opportunities for me. And so I gave Claude access to those emails so I can use it so it's writing in my tone and my style. So this is the skill But if you don't have this built out, you would have to essentially prompt and kind of work Claude through and provide it this context. So it'll give you this kind of output. But in a future video, we'll talk about how to actually package this up to create your own skills. But this is why we're invoking this cold email skill to generate this. Okay, so Claude did complete writing out the email sequence. So we actually look at it. It generated this document file. It goes through the 3 emails, exactly kind of the cadence between each email. Gives us the subject line, the body, call to action, email 2, 3, and 4. And then from here, what we can actually do is, okay, this is the case study it used, and different personas, swap out the email subject lines. So it did give us a couple recommendations on how to actually like operationalize this. What we can do from now is we can say, okay, these emails look good. Can you create these email tasks for Klein in HubSpot? And so what you can do from here is if you have your sales outreach tool connected, so I'm using HubSpot right now, but let's say you had something like Lemlist, or if you had something like SalesLoft connected, you could theoretically push the emails that Claude just created as as a outbound sequence as tasks in your outreach tool. So we'll walk through that, but the idea is that you want to take the emails that Claude is giving you, push them into your, if you're using Gmail, if you're using whatever tool to actually send the emails, and then you do your last mile QA there to make sure that these emails look good to send to a human being. So that's the recommended workflow, just from my experience, is have Claude write the emails, do some quality check in Claude if you want to, but that final thing before you hit send, use a Claude connector, make sure that tool is connected, and then send it directly to that tool. So right now it's using the HubSpot integration. It found the one prospect in Klein, which is the company that we've used throughout this. And then it just assigned these 4 email tasks to Klein. And I'm going to say yes, because it did ask for a quality check, or a compliance check. And then once I approved it, now it's actually going to create this 4-step email sequence in HubSpot. So this is a really great way to take a marketing campaign, create an outbound sequence to generate demand for that campaign, and then once the messaging is there, push it to whatever platform you need to send those emails. So you can have kind of Claude as that interactive kind of connective tissue between all these different tools to generate the messaging to really, really automate a pretty manual workflow. Like one of the big things I never really liked was we would always have these like marketing events that our marketing people put together, but it would always come to the sales rep to actually create the messaging to get your accounts to show up to these events. So it's a really great way to automate a ton of that work. Okay, so Claude just completed this, and I think we should be able to actually go into HubSpot. Let me actually pull up HubSpot on my screen and see. I'll need to authenticate into it. All right, so it took me a sec to authenticate into HubSpot, but here's the first email out of 4 that Claude created. It gave us the subject line options, and it gave us the body of the email, and then it assigned it to the right person within HubSpot. So now as a sales rep, all you have to do is do that final kind of last minute touches, and then you can ship this email out to try to get these people to attend your event. Okay, so we just saw the first workflow, which is how can we take our existing marketing campaigns and marketing assets and use Claude to automate a ton of outbound messaging so we can drive demand and drive attendance to all the events and webinars and assets that our marketing team creates. Now, I want to set the scenario up for our second workflow that we're going to walk through, which is now that you've had an event or you've put a lot of these assets out into the ecosystem and you have these leads coming in, how can we use Claude in order to take a list of leads that have all become qualified leads because they did different activities on your website? And how do we write highly personalized messaging based on what they did in order to become a lead? So for example, we want to have a different email get sent to someone who might have signed up for an ebook versus someone that asked for a demo, or someone that viewed our pricing page gets a different email than someone who attended a meetup that we did at a coffee shop. So the goal here is we're going to give Claude a lead list of different leads, and we're going to have Claude write highly personalized follow-up emails and then push those emails to HubSpot so the sales rep can do that final check before sending it out. So for this scenario, I've created a dummy lead list with, I would say, the most common lead sources just from my experience. And we're going to give Claude the task of leveraging the cold email skill in order to write one highly personalized email based on what was the activity or action the lead did in order to become and enter our sales funnel. So the prompt I'm going to give it is use the cold email skill to generate a highly personalized follow-up email that references, actually, the highly personalized follow-up email based on the action the person did to become a lead. Lead source is in the attached CSV. Now, this is a very common sales workflow that I did as a sales rep because I would go into the office every day and I would probably have like 5 to 10 leads, but they would all be at different points of their adoption and maturity with using our product. And so it's really important to make sure that the messaging meets the customer or the prospect where they are as far as their buying journey is concerned. So I'm going to kick this off, and let's give Claude a minute or so to review the list and then come back to us with what it outputted. Okay, so let's see what Claude outputted. So here's the person's name, the title, the action that they did to become a lead. This was already in the CSV file, so this isn't something that Claude went and found. But Claude did give us some subject line options and then the body of the email. And it did this for all 4. It did do some personalization at the top. It also did some personalization on their title as well. So it calls out VPs of sales, talks about demand gen for someone at the head of demand gen, and also talks about RevOps leaders for the director of RevOps. So it's not only personalizing based on what the person did in order to enter our sales funnel, but also personalizes it based on the role or the title that they gave, and also maybe some potential pain points that title would be responsible for within the company that they work at. So here, for example, demand gen usually gets responsible for the number, but only owns half the levers to drive revenue. This is the number here is revenue number. So this is really good. Now these leads are not in HubSpot today. So the next task that we can give Claude is create the contacts in HubSpot and create an email task for each of them based on email you created for them. So now we can take this CSV file of leads that we have, and we can now push them into our CRM or any sort of outreach system that we're using in order to then be able to quickly send out these emails. So once again, Claude is that connective tissue between not just sales and marketing, but between some of the different tools that we're using. So we could have used some sort of landing page software, capture these leads, brought them into Claude, wrote highly relevant messaging, and then pushed them to our CRM. Or vice versa, they could already be in our CRM and we can pull them from HubSpot, write this messaging, and then push the messaging back out to HubSpot if that's what we're going to use to send it, or we can use something like Salesloft or Lemlist in order to actually send the emails. So let's let Claude go for a minute, and then we'll see what it gave us within, I guess it actually finished. So let's see here. Oh, it's still working through it. So let's give it a minute, and then let's look at HubSpot once it's done. Okay, so Claude just finished creating the contacts and the email tasks in HubSpot. Now, we used a CSV file with these emails in order to write the messaging and then push the messages and the contacts into Claude. However, if you have a CRM already tied to your marketing campaigns and the leads get created in your CRM, you can still use the HubSpot connector or connect your CRM to Claude, pull the contacts and the lead source into Claude, have Claude write that personalized messaging, and then either push it back into HubSpot and have an email task, or you can push it into another tool like even your Gmail account directly in order to send those emails or send those messages. So Claude is really that connective tissue, and I've been using that phrase a lot, but it's really that connective tissue between your tools to come in, do some work, and then push it out to the next tool. So let's actually see what it gave us in HubSpot. So I'm going to switch over to HubSpot for a sec. So this is the lead that it created. And then from here is the task that it created. At the top, you can see it says HubSpot connector for Claude. So that's how we know that it did come from the work we just did. And it gave us the different subject line options, and it gave us the body of the email. So this is a really great way for you to take, and I know I did this across five people, but this is a great way if you have a lead list or a lead queue of 20, 25 people, you can have Claude work through that list, write highly personalized email based on that person's title, based on why they became or whatever action they did to become a lead. And then you can write very highly personalized follow-up emails and then actually push those emails to your outbound sequencing tool of choice so that you can kind of automate your inbound follow-up using Claude as a way to make sure the messaging is really sharp. So this is a great thing to do. This is something that I used to not like doing on a daily basis, where I would spend the first like 5 to 10, or I would go over the first 5 to 10 leads in my queue, and it would be a ton of effort because it's really the first email you need to personalize, or that first message. And I never really enjoyed doing it. But with Claude, you can automate it and build this into a very strong workflow. All right, so that was video number 5 on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. In this video, we really talked about how you can take a lot of your marketing assets, like an event, for example, and use Claude in order to write highly personalized outbound messages to be able to drive demand for all the marketing assets your marketing team or yourself are putting together. The second scenario we talked about is, now that you are running these marketing campaigns and getting inbound leads, how can you write highly personalized follow-up messages to those inbound leads so they convert at a much higher rate, and then you can generate more qualified pipeline through your marketing efforts. Now in video 6, we're going to talk about how you can use Claude Cowork to understand the health of your business and to figure out which deals are the most likely to close and which deals have a ton of risk, and how you can mitigate that risk so they ultimately close in your favor. So I'll see you guys in video 6.